Good evening and welcome to The Journey Home. I'm Marcus Grodi, your host for this program. And once again, I have this wonderful privilege to join you to hear a story of grace and how the Holy Spirit, in this case, brought somebody back. Tonight's guest is, for want of a better word, we use the word revert. Our guest was originally a Catholic, but then was way out there, and then by God's mercy, she came back. But there's an extra privilege in this particular program, as you'll see as soon as the cameras turn away from me. And then my guest is Mother Seraphina Marie, and she's FDM,
yes.
Right? And we'll find out what that means. And I'm guessing, I don't know the story yet. I'm looking forward to hearing it myself, but I'm wondering if when she was a little girl as a Catholic, whether she thought that she'd be sitting not just on a program, but here in this habit. But we're anxious to hear your story. Mother Seraphina.
Really appreciate being here.
Great to have you here.
Thank you.
It really is awesome. And I've been a Catholic for 25 years, but I'm still all the different habits, the different Franciscan spiritualities. I'm anxious to hear about your particular order and what you're committed to. But let me get out of the way and shut up and invite you to start us on the journey. Let's go way back and let's hear your journey of faith.
Way back? You want to go way back?
All the way back.
Because I can go way back. I have very, very early childhood memories.
That's where we want to start.
You know, it's so beautiful because a lot of the memories are even in church. You know, like when I was pre-verbal, you know, just yelling in church and hearing my echo come back. I mean, I have these memories, you know. And I remember I used to love to go to the communion rail with my mom, and I couldn't wait, you know, and I used to practice. Giving my parents away. I used to practice with the poker chips at home, you know, receiving communion and stuff. And, you know, I just thought it was the neatest thing, you know, going to the communion rail with mom and just church in general, you know. And
where was this?
In Bloomfield, New Jersey, Sacred Heart Church in Bloomfield. And I remember, and I didn't know how old I was at the time. Of course, you don't know, you know. But I realized after I had come back to the church and become part of the church family, that when they changed my church physically, I was 2. I remember the day walking in the church at 2 years old in my father's arms and crying. I was like, what'd they do to my church? My beautiful church. They made it so ugly. I remember that. I remember that very profoundly. And so it's very interesting. I had a love for the church as a very young girl. And then, and I remember the day, I mean, I was in probably grammar school or probably grammar school, and they said, you know, and this is before I was able to receive communion, that, you know, oh, you can receive communion on the hand. And I was like, well, okay. I mean, I didn't know anything better at the time. I didn't know what that meant, and you know, but I knew that we didn't kneel at the communion rail anymore.
And that's what you had been looking forward to from the time you were. Oh, that's wild. Wow.
And so, you know, when I was growing up, we went to church every Sunday. I'm one of 6 children. I'm the oldest of 6, and we took up the first row in the church on the left-hand side. That was our family row, you know, and no matter how you know, we had to obey, we had to be good, you know, and discipline was important, you know, especially because you're in the front. But the interesting thing is that when it came to learning about my faith, it was all about, you know, feel-good stuff. You know, the church is good, the church is holy, let's go and make butterflies, you know? And it wasn't really about the meat and potatoes, the nuts and the bolts that I know now about the church. And I went to public school for my primary years.
And that was the time when our catechetics was not the best.
Yeah, we were the experimental generation. And they experimented with all these new catechesis and
flannel boards.
Oh, it's no, we still had chalkboards. But the interesting thing was that, you know, I had Sunday school and stuff, and then I was kind of a wild child in junior high and was failing out of most classes, mostly because I wasn't going. And so my mother put me in a Catholic high school, Immaculate Conception. And in Immaculate Conception, in our, I think it was our sophomore year or junior year, I can't remember exactly, we had Planned Parenthood come in and give us a presentation. And the way it was put forward to us is, oh, abortion's a horrible thing, but it's there if you need it. What was that doing in the mind and the heart of somebody who's so impressionable? And, you know, I was so naive. I just believed everything anybody ever told me. I never questioned things, you know.
Abortion is a horrible thing.
But it's there if you need it. Now, I also remember in our health class watching the silent scream, but there was no presentation, no explanation of what was going on. I knew it was horrible. And I thought, well, I could never do that to my child, but you should have a right to do that. And I remember that, and it's interesting, you know, what the Lord brings to mind. Many years later, he brought to mind a conversation I had, you know, so early on that, you know, it's like, well, you know, I could never do that to my children. So like they were my children. But, you know, if you want, you can do what you want with yours. Almost like, you know, you have the right over life and death of others. And it's kind of horrific.
There's that cultural relativism, the soup that, you know, what's right for you,
absolutely.
What's right for me, it's just different, you know, and I'm not going to force my feelings on you. And of course, it's one thing when it's a neighbor or whatever, but when it gets to be, I'm a parent and I'm not going to force my opinions on you kids. It's up to you to decide whatever you want. That's a crazy world we're in.
It is a crazy world. You know, they don't think of the generations. They don't think, you know, how wonderful and amazing the grandchildren can be, you know. And,
did your parents know what you were getting at school?
No. My mother assumed I was getting the catechesis that she received. And I found out towards the end of my life that my mother wanted to be a sister. And then my father, like, thankfully. Right. You know? Right. But it's very interesting the way things turn out. But I didn't even know women did this anymore. You know, this was like the furthest thing from my mind, because I never met anybody who was really committed, who was a sister who was really committed, who wasn't like under 80 years old, you know? And so I thought it was like for times gone by, and it didn't happen ever, you know? But, you know, I fell into the whole worldview of things, you know, like the whole relativistic type of things. I was a self-professed atheist, you know. Oh, I believe in God, but, you know, who knows the truth, you know, and you know, it's my own truth. So it's almost like secular humanistic as well, you know. It's like I know my own truth, you know, and I even asked a humanist one point, I said, so you mean to tell me if I look at the sky and say, wow, that's a nice green sky, and you have to say, well, that's your reality? And they said, yes. Like, really? Like, there's no truth. You know, like, this table is soft and squishy, right? I don't think so. Anyway, kind of digressing.
Well, but still, I mean, that was the time period, and of course, I always believe that often God lets us go through things because He's preparing us for a future way that will serve. And
that's true,
you know, as you look back on your own life and what you experienced.
Well, sure, absolutely. So when I got out of high school, you know, I mean, I never thought, you know, I was going to get married. I was going to have 6 kids like both of my parents did. Actually, my parents had 6 kids, but each one of them were one of 6. Yeah. So I thought, well, I carry on this tradition, I get married and carry on tradition, you know, and I was going to be a performer. I pursued a performing career in New York, and
talk about it. You got involved with music. Right?
Yes.
At what age did you catch the bug for that?
Well, probably pre-pubescent, you know, 10, 11, 12. I started doing these summer shows, and I just loved being on stage and singing and dancing, and turns out I had a gift to sing, and so, you know, I would do different things, and later on, it was a good entry back into the church. That was one of the steps in my entry back into the church. But I had met in this period when I was in New York and doing all this performing stuff and learning how to perform. Really, I didn't do as much performing as I did learning how to perform. But I had met a man, and we actually got engaged, and we were together for a long time, and. I had been gathering a repertoire together to audition for Opera Conservatory. And then we recommitted.
Any activity at all in church anymore at this point in time?
Oh, not for years. Not for years. You know, I remember going to church when I was about 19. No, earlier than that. I was probably mid-teens, 14, 15. My mother just gave birth to my youngest brother, and he was diagnosed with Down syndrome. And I remember praying, in church fervently, Lord, if he has to be handicapped, make him like not very handicapped, the Lord answered that prayer. So he's a very high functioning man with Down syndrome. He holds a job, and he actually lives in an apartment with 2 other men, and it's amazing.
Praise God.
So.
But after that, you were just gone from the.
Oh yeah, yeah. Basically, unless I was forced, come to, Christmas Mass with me. So I tried to do the Christmas and Easter thing, and whatever, but my heart wasn't there,
Our guest is Mother Seraphina Marie. So you were heading to a secular music career.
Oh, absolutely. And performers, they're so enlightened. They know everything about everything. But at the time, so I was engaged to be married. And we were coming up and starting to make plans, and we found a place where we wanted to live. And one day I'm on the phone talking to a friend, and she's asking me, well, how are you going to decorate? And so we're talking about how we're going to decorate the place, and all of a sudden it flashed in my mind, like almost like my whole life, where I'm where I never wanted to be. This is not how I had planned my life out. This is not, there was something in my heart of hearts, I knew it was wrong. And I said, I can't do this. And my girlfriend said, what are you talking about? I said, I can't marry him. She says, get over here. So I went over to my friend's house and I broke off my engagement that night.
Wow.
Well, I'm a woman of commitment, a woman of true, belief. And if I know in my heart of hearts this is a waste of time, I'm not going to waste my time. I'm not going to waste his time. I just, woman of conviction, go and do what I need to do. And so I broke off my engagement. And it's funny because it was several days where he tried to convince me I needed to go back to, our relationship. And one time I was in my mother's house, my mother and father's house, and, just cleaning the room or whatever. And he calls me and he says, I'm right in front of the church. Why don't you come and meet me? I thought it was kind of an odd thing to say, And I guess, the Lord has this indelible mark on you, when he calls you, even from, before you're born, as we know in Jeremiah, right?
Yep.
Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, dedicated you a prophet. And so, maybe he saw, I know that he probably saw something in me that I didn't even recognize, But it's interesting because at this point in my life was so crazy. I just needed some peace. And so I sought peace at the church of my childhood because I remember having peace there. So I just started going to church to reconnect with my God, And so I went, and I learned the most amazing thing. Like, you can sing there. So I joined the choir, and then after a very short time,
Join the choir, not to go back to faith.
No, just to join the choir, to keep up my voice. I had to keep up my voice somehow, and a nice venue to plug into, And so I became the principal cantor and started cantoring, all the high holy masses and the funerals and all the weddings, and it was a very active parish, about 2,500 families at the time.
No, I ask you. So you were singing this wonderful psalms, but were you listening yet to anything you were saying at that point?
Well, I think it was trickling in, but it took about 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
And, we had at the time when, I was getting ready to make a change, our church had gotten a newly ordained young priest who started teaching us about the real important things in our faith and about devotions, like the devotion to the Blessed Mother, the miraculous medal, and then he'd give out miraculous medals, so I got one of those. I was doomed from that point on. And then he talked about the scapulars, and I got a scapular, and he talked about the Divine Mercy, and then handed out cards of the Divine Mercy and rosaries, how to, to pray them on.
Was this stuff all new to you in a way?
Yeah, it was all new.
Okay.
I had never heard this stuff before. And then one homily on the importance of sacramental confession. And I was like, I never heard this stuff. The most important thing he said to me is that when you go to meet, when you go into the confessional, yes, the priest is there, but you go to meet Jesus. Jesus is there. I had never thought of that before. And at the time in my life, I was doing things I probably shouldn't have, and I was really doing a lot of stupid. But the thing is, I couldn't do stupid. Now, the way it is with sin, it never makes you feel good for very long. Oh, it might, take a couple hours or a couple days or a couple of months, but eventually you feel bad about it. So in those moments, I would confess straight up, because I wasn't going to go to a intermediary, I was going to go straight up, and I'd feel forgiven every single time. Go out and do the same dumb thing, feel awful, confess straight up, and I would feel forgiven. Go out and do the same dumb thing. So like at this point in my life, like it was even habitual. And after that homily, and he gave out examinations of conscience afterwards, I put it in my purse, and that was really the big seed. That was the big watering that my seed needed to kind of grow. And I got so frustrated with myself after again doing the same stupid thing, I was like, I have to prove to myself and my God, see, he was still my God, right? How sorry I am, and I'm going to go and humiliate myself in front of the priest. So I went to a church where nobody knew me.
Of course.
Of course. And I set the day on my planner. I kept the day. I walked into the confessional, and it was absolutely life-changing. I walked out a completely different person. And what I think happened is I left the person there that I didn't want to be. I was absolutely delivered. Now I know that. I didn't know it then. All I knew is that I felt like Atlas without the world. That statue of Atlas holding the world on his shoulders. But I didn't I didn't know it was there, but I knew it was gone. And I had this joy that started almost down at my toes and just bubbled up yes, It was just amazing. And I had a smile on my face for I think 2 weeks, to the point where my cheeks hurt. You smile so much, right? And I had this desire to learn the faith that instinctively I knew I didn't know. And so I needed to do something holy. And I just looked at the bulletin at my local church, and they were going on pilgrimage to Our Lady of Fatima. The National Shrine of Our Lady of Fatima is in New Jersey. Who knew? Well, I called up the lady and who was running the trip, and she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, the bus is full. We don't have any more room." She said, but who are you? Who am I talking to? So I told her who I was, and she said, "Oh, you're the one with that beautiful voice." She goes, "You're going to come if I have to stand." So I did go, and that was just I had an amazing spiritual experience that I never had before. And they had beautiful periodicals there, Catholic periodicals, apologetic periodicals that I kind of devoured, and then looked at the references and went and got those things, and then they had free audio tapes, so I got some of those, and they led to other things, and I started learning the faith through really apologetics. So it's very interesting because it took me an entire year to learn about the Eucharist. I didn't know this. That's really Jesus? Who knew? Nobody ever.
So were they not telling you, or you weren't listening?
I don't know.
As you look back, you know what I mean?
All I know is that I didn't know it.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting too, because now I'm sure that before I made my Holy Communion, I'm sure somebody said something, but at age what? Right. Whatever it was, I didn't compute. But again, like I said before, it's interesting what the Lord brings to mind. I remember a conversation I had with my cousin when I was 11, and we're talking about the Eucharist. And I said, "Oh yeah, I think it's just symbolic. It's a mere, representation of God." I remember this conversation, and that I believed for a long time until my world was changed. Because, and think about it, it makes perfect sense. Who is God? I mean, who is Jesus? Yeah. Jesus is God, right? Well, what happens when God speaks? Do you know, Marcus? What happens when God speaks?
It is.
That's it. Like, bang, it just happens, right?
Yeah.
God said in the beginning, let there be light. Bang, there was light. Let there be a separation in the heavens above and the earth below. Bang, it just happened. Like, that's the big bang, right? So if God speaks, and Jesus at the Last Supper holds up a piece of bread and says, this is my body. That became his body. And so through the priest, Jesus says it again and again and again. This is my body. And that becomes, I didn't know these things. Nobody ever told me. Like, if I knew that was Jesus, I'd have never left Jesus. And that was just probably the most profound part of it for me.
You know, what fascinates me about conversion is the way the Lord uses things, moments, encounters to awaken us by grace. And his timing is perfect. Because, you know, what I want to say is, okay, time on here. Okay, what was it about that confessional and that moment when you went in that door that changed you? So I can duplicate it, so we can make sure everybody that has that has it. But it was him and you. And it was you being changed by grace at that moment.
Yeah. And I was given unbelievable spiritual gifts. Do you know, I was given the gift to never desire to go back to my old life again. Changed all my friends, just instinctively knew I had to, and stopped doing stupid.
But you know, it's because of that you know in here that helped me believe in the reality of the sacramental miracles, is because I know what grace did to me. And you know what grace did to you in that confession.
Absolutely.
You know the reality of the miracle of change.
And you know, you say timing is the perfect. Yes, God's timing is absolutely perfect. You know, the priest turned to me and he said in that confession, he says, do you know what readings we're doing at Mass tomorrow? And I said, well, no. He said, the prodigal son. He said, you're the prodigal son. And I said, I didn't know what that meant at the time. And I was like, okay, well, there you go. Like, I knew the story, but I didn't understand the impact, you know.
Yeah,
and so it was very, very interesting, you know, God's timing.
So were you back in the church at that point?
I was so back in the church, I can't even tell you. And I had been coming back little by little. This newly ordained priest had asked me to start a young adult group in the church and to invite other people. So I was, yeah, okay, I can do that, you know. And it'd be nice to get together with like-minded, what I thought like-minded people, you know. And so we'd get together, and it was a very successful young adult group, as a matter of fact. And I was even asked to teach the Sunday school. I didn't know I wasn't Catholic. Not until then, you know, until I started learning my faith. I really didn't understand.
Did this awakening that then led to a hunger, you know, it's kind of like when you look at the Beatitudes, a hunger and thirsting for righteousness and all of that. Were you remembering things you taught, or was there an infusion of desire and knowledge? You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely infused. Absolutely infused. It was nothing that I was taught, nothing that I remembered. It was totally infused. And I mean, I was so hungry for it and to do holy things. And I was beside myself. But it's interesting the way the Lord works with you, you know, because of course his timing is perfect and he only works with what we can handle at a particular time. You know, I was not pro-life. I didn't know to be Catholic you had to be. I didn't understand that, you know. And so probably 3 months down the road at an epiphany party with these young adults, my friend comes up to me and she's talking to me about my younger brother who's got Down syndrome. He had come to the youth group and she was saying, oh, he's so wonderful, you know, he was such a bright light. And I was like, oh yeah, he's like the heart and soul of our family. He taught us what love really was, you know. We were all on the outs at this point and he just brought us all together. I mean, it was just really, he's the unifying force of our family. She said, wow, people really need to hear that. Would you be willing to tell people? I said, absolutely. So she was, great. We're going to have a pro-life prayer vigil in 2 weeks. And I was like, ding, 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 ding. Like, what did I get into? Like, I didn't, you know, pro-life, what? I didn't understand where she was going with all of this, but I had already given my word.
You'd been told a long time ago, abortion's bad, but
it's okay, yeah. And so I'm a woman of my word. I gave my word. I wasn't going to retract it at that point. So I figured, well, let me just see about this pro-life stuff anyway. So I started doing a little research and I thought, oh yeah, it's still horrible. I could never do that to my kids. And finally the morning came, and my heart still wasn't really there, but I was going to give my little witness, and I'd been praying to the Holy Spirit and St. Anthony, because his tongue was incorrupt, you know, so I learned about St. Anthony. I was like, okay, so give me the tongue, you know, I don't know what to say. And so the morning came, and we met at this church. It was a church that was literally around the block from the abortion clinic. And after church, we watched, in the Undercroft, we watched the Silent Scream. Still, my heart hadn't changed. We processed praying the rosary, and we were across the street from the abortion clinic, and we were praying, and then there were, you know, priests who got up and started saying things, and then Protestant pastors got up and started saying things, and then it was my turn. And I didn't know what I said, what I was going to say. I just got up in front of everybody and was like, I'm just here to tell you about somebody who's really special to me. And it was at that moment the Lord just lifted the veil, and I saw for the first time that the excuse they give to keep abortion legal is because it might be like my brother. I was absolutely incensed, and I knew that I had been lied to all my life, and I knew I needed to do something about it. So I got into very active pro-life work from that moment forward.
I bet you didn't have a tear in your eye when you gave that talk.
No, I don't know what I said, but apparently it was very moving for everybody else.
I'm trying to imagine you having that awakening and just.
Oh, I remember saying, I remember feeling like just absolutely anger at never being told the truth before. And so I communicated that somehow. I don't know how. I don't remember what I said. I guess the Holy Spirit just kind of took over. And all I remember is how I experienced it.
Wow. All right, we're going to take a break. Our guest is Mother Seraphina Marie, and we'll come back in a moment because we haven't got you in that habit yet, right? To hear that call for that, as well as your music career and all of that. So we'll talk about that in a moment. And I also want to remind you all that stories like hers, especially coming out of atheism. I'm going to remind you of that book. That's what I wanted to make sure to remind you of. That I have a book that I helped write. I wrote the foreword for, but it's about atheism, and published by EWTN. And it was 8 of the Journey Home episodes of atheists who shared their journey on the church, and then they were edited and put into this wonderful book published by EWTN. And we really hope that you would consider getting that, because there are a lot of people out there today especially, that have been bought into relativism, and they've moved from their Catholic or even Protestant backgrounds into atheism. That's why we have this wonderful book called From Atheism to Catholicism. So I want you to consider that. Be back in a moment. Welcome back to The Journey Home. I'm your host, Marcus Grodi, and our guest is Mother Seraphina Marie. And she has a website, fdofmary.org. It's the Franciscan Daughters of Mary.org. So find out about the work of her and her sisters. And let's, before we move on, again, I wanted to, we've left you on fire for the Lord. You're hungry, right? And you've been awakened to the pro-life movement. Though, like so many of us, you were formed in the church. Many of us even grew up looking like we were great Lutherans or great Catholics, and somebody would never have guessed that we didn't really have it in here. I don't know if that's the way you were. Probably never guessed.
Absolutely.
So then you have this awakening, and I'm wondering, as you look back, was that awakening, did you have a good image of our Lord Jesus Christ? Did you have a good image of Our Lady?
Well,
what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's very interesting. My mother always instilled in us a devotion to Our Lady. So I always had a devotion to Our Lady. And here's the beautiful thing is my grandmother, who I was named after, sang in church. And At Christmas time, I remember year after year after year as a child, when the Ave Maria came on the record player, the whole house, all my mother and her siblings and extended family, everything got quiet and everybody listened to the Ave Maria. The Bach Gounod version, which is not as popular as the other one that everybody listens to, the Schubert version. And out of end you hear, as the tears start streaming down the face. So when I first started taking voice lessons, I had to learn the Ave. So the teacher said, well, okay, we're going to do this version. I said, no, not this version, because she wanted to do the Schubert's version. I said, I want to do the Bach Gounod version. And she goes, but that's much more difficult. And I said, well, that's the one I want to learn. So I always had this great devotion to Our Lady, not really knowing what that meant, just that and I didn't even know the rosary. Like, I knew it consisted of Our Fathers and Hail Marys, but that's it. I didn't know it was a meditation on the life and death and resurrection of the Lord. I had no clue until I had been given a Bible after my conversion. Somebody gave me a Bible, and I started reading it, and in the Bible, it was one of those really big ones. In there were pages on how to pray the rosary. So I taught myself how to pray the rosary, and it gave little scripture references. So I went to the scripture references and was reading while I was praying the Hail Marys, almost like that meditative kind of way, almost like the musical background to the scripture. And I'll never forget, one night I had the most evil dream, and I really believe that the evil one was trying to do something there, and I was so frightened. I woke up out of a dead sleep and knelt down and prayed 15 decades of the rosary for the first time ever, like straight through. And then I found comfort in that, and so I prayed a rosary every day from that point forward. And so
it seems to me that your journey does remind us as parents, even if our children wandered, the importance of planting those seeds.
Absolutely.
Because that's what you're talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And being a good witness. My mother and father never talked a lot about the church. We didn't talk about Catholicism at home, but we were expected to do certain things and act and behave in certain ways, especially towards one another, but these are all Catholic ways. This is the living out of the Catholic life without saying, this is what you need to do and this has to be Catholic. I think it would have been clearer if they had spoken about it, but it wasn't necessarily. And when I became a teenager, my father stopped going to church, Eventually, my mother stopped going every week. And it was very beautiful because when I came back to the faith, she started going again.
There you go.
Yeah, it's beautiful, very beautiful.
A lot of people, church is their Sunday thing, and then their Monday through Friday and Saturday thing is everything else in the world. So even if people that get on fire for the church, sometimes does it start impacting their Monday through Saturday? Well, you had a music career. What happened?
Well, it was a pseudo music career. I was still studying, really. I was doing more studying than performing,
Okay.
But, I had actually done the whole acting thing. I went to one place in New York for acting school in New York, and it was awful. They taught all this terrible method acting where, you had to feel everything. And, they brainwashed you into thinking like you had to suffer in your own personal life to be any good as a performer. I mean, without coming out and saying it, that's really the message everybody got. So after a year of that, I was done with it. And so I said, I'm going to go back to the classics. I'm going to study Shakespeare. I'm going to do ballet. And I may as well do opera because, those are the classics. And so I got into, I studied Shakespeare with a woman who wrote, you don't have to be British to do Shakespeare. And I started dancing ballet twice a week, and I absolutely loved it. And I started studying opera. And that's when the voice just opened up. It's like the whole voice and my whole system was created for this kind of music. The opera or even liturgical, which I kind of, classical kind of music. And I had been working with my opera coach, or my opera teacher, the teacher. She was going to help me to compile a repertoire to audition for conservatory. And in the midst of it all, something said, you have to step away. This was after my conversion, that you have to step away. And I had never had like a regular day job. You know, I had done like side jobs and waitressing and different things like that, but I never had a day job. So I asked my roommate, she worked at this place, this corporation. I said, well, are they hiring? She said, yeah, go and see my friend. Well, I was hired on the spot. And it turns out that I had a real gift for sales. Who knew? And they fast-tracked me. I went from, entry-level sales to management in 3 months.
Whoa.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And I was very successful. I was very good at what I did. And, even won prizes for being, the cash seller in the New York, New Jersey market, and it was very interesting. And at this time I was like living in silk, if you went into my bedroom at that time, every nice outfit was literally silk, And I bought an SUV when they just started being popular, right? And it was a hunter green color, so I had to go out and get a hunter green silk dress with hunter green pumps and hunter green, purse and hair tie. And
you sound like the poster child of the health and wealth gospel.
It was great. It was great.
You convert to Jesus and there you are.
But I knew that at this time, like I told you before, I was getting into very active pro-life work. And I got involved with a grassroots organization called LifeNet, who actually went into the schools to teach the kids. And I was like, I'm all about this. I got to tell them the truth, And I felt like the Lord was trying to tell me, the Holy Spirit is saying, take a step back. You need to do this more. You make more time for this. So I got my resume together, and I was going to quit my job. And then they offered me a promotion. So I was like, okay, so is this the will of God? And I was like, okay, well, we'll see where this goes. So I stayed with the company, and I had to take my vacation. So I came back from vacation, and I got called into the office. While I was on vacation, my supervisor, one of the vice presidents, dug up some dirt on me, and they fired me. And not only fired me, they humiliated me, because they went and interviewed all my staff and found like this thing. And I mean, I didn't do the right thing, it's true. I didn't do anything different than everybody else, but, and I think it's just because the CEO of the company wanted to put somebody else in that position they had offered me. And that's okay. And it's funny too, because I was on the phone with my lawyer after that, that day when I got fired. And he's like, okay, so what do you want to do? Do you want your job back? And I thought, oh no, this is what I've been praying for, a sign of some kind. So be careful what you pray for, you just might get kicked in the pants before you get your prayer answered. So I figured, okay, so I'm going to delve into pro-life work here. And so because I knew the Lord wanted me to give more time, I stepped away from doing the performing too, to do all of this. And I tried to make a go of it, and I was semi-successful at doing it as a missionary, where you had to raise your own funds and to do this as so I had to have a side job anyway. I had to have a part-time job, after my 401k ran out. Excuse me, I had to have a side job just to support myself. And so I realized, like, the Lord, this is definitely where the Lord wanted me, because of the way He converted me to being pro-life. I knew that it was around this. I knew this. But I didn't understand exactly what that meant. Okay, so if I can back up a little.
Yep.
So here I am after the conversion, and I have this to being pro-life, and I'm just newly refounded my Catholic identity. All of a sudden, the Lord just started putting these people in my life I didn't know existed, like people that were really like faithful to God, that really loved God, and like gave everything up just for the Lord. And I was like, where were you before? And so all these wonderful people started coming into my life, and so I started doing Catholic things, going to Catholic conferences, going to Catholic, things. Padre Pio's glove came to town, so I had to get blessed. I didn't know who Padre Pio was at the time. Now, I took him as my spiritual father, but I didn't know who he was at the time. Just taking it step by step by step, as it was presented to me. So the Lord gave me unbelievable formation. Unbelievable formation in the truth, in classic spirituality. Like, I didn't read all the, semi-holy things. Like, the people he put in my life were absolutely Catholic, absolutely devoted to Catholic Church, Catholicism, everything that's, classically traditional, but not too far to the right, because you can swing too far and get, angry at everybody else. So right in the middle, I was so blessed to have all of these people in my life. And so I had been exposed to some holy people, but mostly lay people, until I went to this one conference. It was a youth conference at Dunwoody Seminary. And it turns out it was a Youth 2000. And the Sisters of Life were there. And all I remember is like this sea of white and blue just breezing past me. I was like, and they were young. And I was like, that is awesome. Where'd that go? What happened? Who are these people? And so the Lord just started, working on me in my heart as far as like a vocation. Like, okay, so it is possible. Not, I got to run for it. It just is possible. Yeah. And so, I kind of picked and chose and said, oh, yeah, this is nice, that is nice. And I said, oh, yeah, I have to definitely be devoted to Mary. It has to be pro-life, on and on, if ever. So while you were working, this was working away at you. Okay. Exactly. Gotcha. So it was like the under, current that was going on, which was beautiful. So one day at my regular day job, my regular sales job, my employer was Catholic, and she had a picture of Our Lady of Guadalupe in the lobby area. So I just happened to be walking by the picture of Our Lady of Guadalupe. I glanced over, and it was like, again, one of these grace moments where I just had to give everything up for the Lord. Like, at the time, I was going to Mass every day. I was going to Eucharistic Holy Hour every day. I was in 7 different ministries in my church, 3 of which I started. And it still wasn't enough. I had to give my whole life to the Lord. So from that point to the point of entry was 3 months, because I don't mess around.
Well, I was wondering, with getting fired, where was that in relationship to that? Yeah. Okay, so
I knew I had to do something about this.
Right.
So I visited the Sisters of Life, because they made such a great impact on me, and they're pro-life, and it was great. And I was planning on being a Sister of Life, and then I met these other sisters that I had met through the pro-life organization, because they were pro-life sisters, but they were Franciscan. And I met them at a prayer meeting, and one of them said to me, "You're discerning a vocation." And I said, "Yeah, how'd you know?" And she says, "Well, why don't you just come to dinner?" And I did. So dinner led to a weekend and led to a week. And I remember Saturday night, we're just sitting around the dinner table, just laughing, having dessert. And I blurted out of my mouth, not even, no premeditation, just, "When can I join?" Just like that. And this was a new community. They had just formed. And I was going to be a Sister of Life because they had made such a great impact, not even knowing about the spiritualities, Franciscan, Augustinian spirituality, which the Sisters of Life had. I had no clue. But I knew that as soon as it left my mouth, it was right. Just this divine knowledge that this was absolutely right for me. And so from that point to, it was about a month and a half. I said I had to get through the holidays because, I couldn't do this to my family before the holidays. It'd be too jarring for them, right? So we're at the dinner table one night, and I announced, after the holidays, I announced, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to join this community." And they're like, "Oh, we thought you'd be a sister someday." I was like, "Really?" I didn't know, but they did. Very interesting. So it was just a beautiful little journey. So I came to the community, and after about 3 months, living the life, again, I was like, the light bulb goes off, and it's like, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. This is who I am. Like, here I've gone through all of this, almost a whole lifetime of experiences, and saying, who am I? What am I doing? Where am I going? What am I supposed to be? And here I am. Every one of those questions was answered. And the Lord, in his wonderful comedy, he had made me Franciscan from the womb, because all of the aspects of our Franciscan life were present in my childhood and growing up, and it just carried with me. So it was beautiful.
If you, let's say, either Catholic or non-Catholic watching, who isn't familiar with the spirituality of a Franciscan sister, what would you, I mean, you've got 10 minutes, but I mean, what would you really say is the key aspects of the unique spirituality of Franciscan sisters?
Okay, we, like most sisters, profess vows to Jesus of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Our community makes a fourth vow to uphold the dignity of every human person from the moment of conception to natural death. But the poverty is radical. In our rule of life, it states that everything we have belongs to the poor. We just use what we need. But if they need it more, we give it to them. So like on a regular basis, we're giving away like our entire food pantry, or we're giving away, our clothing, like our coats or umbrellas, or I gave away sister's shoes one day, but they were not on her feet, okay? And we've given away like our appliances and furniture and even our beds. And we just trust that the Lord will provide what we need again when he sees fit. And so that's a radical, in our community, the way we live it out, it's a radical poverty.
I've often thought that it is radical, of course, but even for us non-religious, the core of that should be the core of our life. I mean, we need food, and we need water, and we need clothing, and we need a place to live under, and we need a church nearby. Everything else is over and above, right?
Yes.
Everything else is over and above.
Yes.
At the core of everything, we plan our lives. What am I going to do when I retire? You need food, you need water, you need clothing, you need shelter, and a church. There you go. And there's the core of your life. And
yes, but your Heavenly Father knows you need these things.
No, that's what I'm saying. what I'm saying is most people think they need everything else.
Yes.
That's the core.
Yes.
And what you're saying is that not only is that the core, but it's totally in the hands of God.
Right.
Totally in the hands
Absolutely. Of God. So because, the Lord dresses the fields of flowers, and he knows every single one of those sparrows, right? And he's counted every hair on my head, and he knows what I need. He knows what I desire. But he knows mostly what I need, and he provides. And it's beautiful. Because of this freedom that we have to let him work in our lives, he manifests it in such a beautiful way. The more you trust in God, the more he blesses you. That's just the way it works, because, if you don't trust him, you don't allow him to work in your life. He wants to, but you don't allow him. You put and he won't compromise your will. So if I say, you got to stay out here, that's where he stays. So, but if I let him in, I say, okay, be in every part of my life. One year we went on a fast, and we were going to fast from everything basically, except for, especially like coffee. Like I was a big coffee drinker, Okay, so like where are we going to get the coffee from if we're just going to leave? Because one year we decided just to let the Lord provide whatever we needed. We weren't going to go to the store. We weren't going to buy anything, even though He provides the money for us to do so. We weren't going to go and buy any food or anything. Just whatever is donated. And I was like thinking to myself, okay, like where am I going to get coffee? We eat an abundance of eggs because we fast 3 times a week. So like, where are we going to get eggs? We've never been donated these things before. The very next day, we were donated eggs and coffee. So just like the very next day, the Lord didn't waste any time in showing, okay, I am here for you, and I will be there for you.
It's almost like God will do that in anyone's life. It's just the majority of us are so much in the soup of our culture that we don't give them a chance. You know, we're so caught up in all this other stuff. In fact, what really comes to my mind, we got an email, but I'm gonna go to that in a second, because what I want is, how do you help young people out there that are in the soup of technology or in the soup of our culture? How do you help them see the beauty of the life to which you've been called?
All we can do is invite, and, you know, or even challenge. You know, I challenge you. Do this for a week. Do it even if a week is too long. Do it for a day. You know, just see, you know, how much God can work in your life in a day. And God will not be outdone, you know, and He will absolutely answer the prayers. He will answer even your desires sometimes, if He knows that's what's going to draw you closer to Him. So I would even challenge them, you know, just like, okay, be free of technology for a day. Turn your phone off for a day and just be free and see what God does. You know, you've never heard God's voice? Well, turn all the media off and just ask Him, Lord, speak to me.
There's that wonderful psalm where it says, delight in the Lord, and He'll give you the desires of your heart.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
But the interesting, and you know it's better than me, the interesting conundrum of that is that He changes our desires. Right? It isn't just He's going to give me everything I want. No, pretty soon you're wanting what He wants. That's I
like to think of it as transforming our desires.
There, yeah.
You know, because He takes what's already there and transforms it to something so much more beautiful. And when you can, and when He lifts the veil and you can see, yes, that's when the desire comes. Yes, this is what I want. And so.
Got an email from Dominica from St. Paul, who writes, my brother-in-law is a successful businessman and is someone who seems to have it all. He hasn't been to church in years and seems to think he is able to create his own happiness and that his success is a result of his own efforts. How can I help reach him, convey to him that he needs God in his life and that he won't be complete or truly happy without a relationship with God?
Well, I don't think that Dominica could. I think that Our Lady can, though. And, you know, when you ask Our Lady to do something, she always comes through. She's a really good mother. She's responsible. I hold her responsible for my conversion and my whole life. You know, we're dedicated to Mary. Pray to Mary, do a novena. You know, Mother Teresa's flying novena, you know, the Memorare 9 times, and then once more for Thanksgiving of prayers answered, you know. Do that for 9 days or however long you feel like you need to.
You said that when you announced to your family that you were going to go into religious life, you said, oh, we knew that all the time. Had someone in your family been praying for you?
You know, I'm absolutely convinced, and I don't know how I know, but I know that my grandmother was. My grandmother died a month before I was born, and that's why I was named after her. So she knew me, and I knew her, but I didn't know her, you know, when I was still in my mother's womb. But I know for sure it was through her prayers and Our Lady. You know, I'm sure she prayed to Our Lady too, you know, to intercede for me, that it all came together at that perfect moment when I was ready to receive it.
How would you say that the pro-life aspect of your vocation is a special aspect of your Franciscan calling?
Well, you know, it's what we should be doing anyway, but we take a decided role in the church to uphold the dignity of every human person from the moment of conception to after death. So that means really giving the love of Jesus Christ to every single person, first to the sisters and then every person that we meet, no matter who you are, no matter the circumstances of your life, where you come from or where you're going.
Yeah, Jesus said something about whatever you do, the least of these.
Yes, yes, He did.
I mean, that's
Absolutely.
Jesus, right? That's Jesus there. And maybe one last word of reflection to the audience about the beauty of your brother.
He is really the light of our life. I think that if my brother wasn't born and if he didn't have his handicap, we couldn't learn what we do. And you know, I constantly refer to him in the spiritual life because we're all handicapped to the Lord. I mean, you know, none of us is God. So in other words, we're all little handicapped. So, But it gives me an opportunity to witness to the tenderness of the Lord, because what happens when a handicapped person who doesn't really know how to do something messes up again? Well, it's so easy to forgive them, isn't it? Because you know that they don't know it, they can't do it.
Mother Seraphina, thank you very much for joining us on the program and sharing your story and also all the work that you do in response to the work of grace in your life. Thank you very much.
God bless you.
And thank you for joining us on this episode of The Journey Home. Again, let me remind you about chnetwork.org. That's the website where you can connect with me and my work and hear more conversion stories. And I'd love to hear how mother's story affected you. God bless you. See you next week.